Life has a strange way of teaching us lessons. The more we try to control every little detail, the outcomes, the timing, the way people respond, the more frustrated and exhausted we become. We plan our lives down to the smallest steps, thinking that if we just try harder, push more, and never let go, things will finally fall into place. But what if I told you that the opposite is true? Because the harder we grip, the more things slip through our fingers. The more we obsess over how things should happen, the more disconnected we become from the flow of how things are meant to happen. It's one of life's greatest paradoxes, that the moment you ease your grip and stop chasing with desperation, the very things you long for begin to unfold naturally. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped suffocating the process. That's not weakness, that's wisdom, that's Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that we must accept what comes, woven in the pattern of your destiny, for what could more aptly fit your needs. It's a reminder that peace doesn't come from trying to bend the world to your will. It comes from aligning yourself with the deeper rhythm of life. And that's what this video is about. The mindset shift that frees you from the anxiety of control. The quiet, calm power of relaxing your mind, letting go of force and aligning with intention. This isn't about giving up, it's about rising above. Because when you live like a Stoic, anchored in clarity, detached from outcomes, rooted in the present, you don't chase what's meant for you, you attract it. And if something in this message resonates with you, if you're drawn to these deeper questions, to philosophy that actually shapes the way you live, consider subscribing. It only takes a second, but it's a way of saying this path means something to you. That you're not just consuming ideas, but choosing to live with greater clarity, purpose, and peace. Most people grow up believing that success is the result of pushing harder, grinding longer, and never letting up. There's this deeply ingrained idea that the universe responds to pressure, that if you just squeeze tighter, hold on longer, and micromanage every inch of your life, things will finally bend in your favor. It sounds logical. Effort equals control. But somewhere along the way, you notice the cracks. You gave your all to that job application, only to get ghosted. You put everything into that relationship, only to watch it dissolve anyway. You overthink, overplan, overextend, and still, life doesn't deliver on your timeline. And the cruel part? No one prepares you for that moment when your relentless effort starts working against you. When the more you push, the more resistance you feel. That's where Stoic philosophy offers something radically different. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Let that sit for a second. Disregarding what lies beyond our control. How often do we actually do that? Most of us, whether we realize it or not, spend our energy trying to manage what was never ours to manage in the first place. We try to control timing as if life is a machine we can set to our schedule. We try to control people's reactions, hoping that if we say the right thing or behave a certain way, they'll validate our worth. We try to control outcomes, believing that the tighter our grip, the more likely things will go according to plan. But the truth? The more we cling, the more we suffer. And here's where the shift begins. Relaxation isn't laziness, it's wisdom. It's not about surrendering effort. It's about releasing the illusion that effort guarantees control. When you stop trying to force what you can't command, you free your mind from the constant tension of uncertainty. You move from a reactive state into a centered one, and in that space, clarity grows. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." That applies not only to our inner conflicts, but also to how we approach life. When you resist uncertainty, it becomes your enemy. When you fight timing, it drags you down. But when you stop resisting and start aligning with reality, you begin to see the difference between real strength and forced effort. Strength isn't in trying to dominate every situation. It's in knowing where your influence ends and trusting what unfolds beyond it. This doesn't mean you give up on your goals. Stoicism never asked us to be passive. It asks us to be deliberate. It asks us to master the things within our power, our thoughts, our responses, our mindset, and let go of everything else. It's a practice of internal discipline, not external domination. Think about that. How much lighter would your mind feel if you stopped tying your peace to things outside your control? Aristotle believed that true happiness comes not from external achievement, but from living in accordance with virtue, acting in a way that aligns with reason and character. Hustling out of desperation, that's not virtue. Obsessing over timing and chasing validation, that's not reason. But taking purposeful steps towards something meaningful while remaining detached from how and when it arrives, that's character. That's where peace begins. There's something quietly powerful about the person who shows up, does the work, and then lets go. Not because they don't care, but because they've realized that gripping tighter won't make life move faster. There's a quiet confidence in knowing that your role is action, not outcome. That your worth isn't measured by immediate results, but by how you carry yourself when things don't go your way. Socrates once taught that the unexamined life is not worth living, but I think the unexamined mind is just as dangerous, because an unchecked mind will tell you that every delay is your fault, that every rejection is a reflection of your value, that if you're not seeing results, you must be doing something wrong. That voice in your head becomes a tyrant, demanding more, offering less. But once you examine that voice, you begin to question its authority. You stop mistaking noise for truth. Relaxation, then, is an act of rebellion against that voice. It's choosing stillness over panic. It's choosing to pause, breathe, and say, I've done my part. Now I trust the rest will unfold. That trust? That's not naive. That's strength. That's faith, not in luck, but in process. Plato once wrote that a good decision is based on knowledge and not on numbers. But most of us measure our progress by external markers, likes, promotions, income, attention. And yet some of the most important changes in life happen silently. The moment you stop chasing and start aligning, you won't always see immediate validation. But your mind changes, your nervous system relaxes, your self-respect strengthens. That's progress, just not the kind that gets posted. And here's the truth. Most of what you think you want is tied to how you want to feel. You want success because you believe it will give you security. You want love because you believe it will give you peace. But what if you could cultivate that peace internally, right now? Not perfectly, not instantly, but deliberately, patiently, day by day. That's the Stoic way, mastering the inside so that the outside no longer controls you. We live in a world that rewards speed, noise, and visibility. But the things that truly change your life often begin quietly, in the unseen places, in the silent shifts. The moment you decide to stop grasping and start trusting, the moment you realize that your power isn't in the outcome, it's in how you show up every single day, regardless of the outcome. So maybe the real work isn't in trying harder. Maybe it's in releasing the belief that effort should guarantee results. Maybe it's in showing up from a place of purpose, not panic. Maybe it's in doing what you can, then letting go, and letting life meet you halfway. Because once you stop trying to control everything, you finally start to feel what it means to be free. Do you know why it hurts so deeply when things don't go the way you expected? It's not just the rejection, the silence, or the setback that stings. It's the story you wrote in your mind, the way you imagined it was all supposed to unfold, the job you thought would validate you, the person you believed would never leave, the timing you were sure would be perfect. When that imagined future doesn't happen, it's not the reality that breaks your heart. It's the crumbling of your attachment to that imagined outcome. And that's why Stoic wisdom feels so radical, so healing in these moments. Epictetus wrote, "Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, wish that what happens happen as it does, and you will be happy." At first glance, that sounds like giving up, but it's not. It's a call to something more powerful than control, acceptance. You see, detachment isn't apathy. It's not indifference. It's not resignation. It's presence. It's the ability to stay rooted in what is rather than what should have been. It's about meeting reality with clarity instead of resistance. When you're attached, you're living in the future. You're bargaining with fate. You're trying to negotiate your way into certainty. But life doesn't work like that. The world owes you no guarantees, and the more you cling to your script of how things should happen, the more you suffer when life writes its own version. But when you're detached, genuinely detached, you become available to the present moment. You become open to possibility rather than imprisoned by expectation. Think of a seed pushing through the soil. It doesn't demand sunlight on its own schedule. It doesn't scream at the sky for faster growth. It just leans into its nature, quietly, patiently, persistently. It grows because it trusts the process written into its being. You're no different. There's a version of you that doesn't have to force anything. A version of you that's not desperate for timing, for outcomes, for certainty. A version that knows when you stop needing, you start aligning. When you stop forcing, you allow. And what you allow, what you truly make space for, has room to flow into your life in ways you never could have controlled or predicted. Plato once said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self." And detachment is one of the highest forms of self-mastery. It requires you to let go not just of what you want, but of the need to have it your way. It teaches you to hold life with open hands instead of clenched fists. Because every time you grasp too tightly, you choke the life out of the moment. You miss what's actually happening because you're lost in what was supposed to happen. And slowly, almost without realizing it, your peace becomes conditional. Your happiness becomes negotiable. Your worth becomes tied to things you can't actually control. But the moment you choose presence over attachment, everything begins to shift. You start to live from the inside out, not reacting to every twist of fate like a leaf in the wind, but responding from a deeper place. A grounded awareness that doesn't flinch every time life throws a curveball. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." That choice, in many ways, begins with letting go of your expectations, letting go of the mental script that says it was supposed to be this way. Because maybe it wasn't. Maybe this detour is part of your development. Maybe this delay is saving you from something you don't yet see. Maybe the closed door is redirecting you, not punishing you. You don't have to know why things are unfolding the way they are to make peace with them. You just have to trust that peace isn't on the other side of control. It's on the other side of surrender. That doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop collapsing every time things don't follow your script. It means you stop measuring your life against timelines that were never guaranteed. It means you stop needing external outcomes to validate your internal worth. Socrates believed that wisdom begins in wonder. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is sit with the mystery instead of trying to solve it. To wonder instead of worry. To be curious instead of controlling. That's the heart of detachment. Not coldness, but openness. Not withdrawal, but grounded presence. You show up, you give your best, and then you release. Not because you don't care, but because you understand that your peace matters more than your plans. And that's where something beautiful starts to happen. When you stop needing everything to go a certain way, you become open to new ways. When you stop obsessing over the outcome, you begin to fall in love with the process. You show up with calm energy instead of anxious effort. You trust your steps, even when the path isn't clear. You begin to experience a different kind of power, the kind that doesn't come from dominating life, but from aligning with it. Aristotle taught that true happiness comes from fulfilling your purpose, not chasing pleasure or status. And part of that purpose is learning how to live with intention, not obsession. Learning how to act from clarity, not desperation. Learning how to want without needing and to care without clinging. That's not easy. It's a practice, a daily recalibration. But the more you return to that place, the space between desire and demand, the more freedom you find. Because freedom isn't just about doing what you want. It's about being at peace when you don't get what you want. It's about no longer needing every moment to validate you. It's about choosing your response even when you can't choose your circumstances. And that choice, the choice to let go, to relax, to stay present, that's where everything begins to shift. That's where true manifestation starts. Not from force, but from flow. Not from trying to control life, but from learning how to meet it as it is. And when you do that, when you show up rooted in presence, aligned in purpose, and open to whatever comes, you'll start to see how life softens, how things begin to find you. Not because you chased harder, but because you created the space to receive. That's the paradox. You manifest more, not by trying harder, but by needing less. You receive more, not by reaching, but by resting in your own presence. You move forward not by gripping, but by growing, quietly, like the seed in the soil, faithfully, patiently, and always in harmony with the season you're in. Let me ask you something. What would happen if you stopped rushing? Really stopped. Not for a weekend, not during a meditation session, but in your day-to-day mindset, your goals, your plans, your expectations. Most of us don't even realize how fast we're trying to move through life. We wake up already behind, measuring our value by how much we've accomplished, how far we've gotten, how quickly we're climbing. We've been taught that moving fast is the same thing as moving forward, that urgency equals progress. But urgency, more often than not, isn't a sign of momentum. It's a signal of fear. A fear of missing out, of falling behind, of not being good enough unless things happen now. And that fear doesn't create peace. It creates chaos. When your decisions come from fear, you begin operating in survival mode. Everything becomes a race against time. Your self-worth gets tied to timelines and comparisons. You start looking at life like a checklist you're running out of time to complete. But here's the quiet truth most people miss. Speed doesn't always bring clarity. In fact, it often clouds it. The Stoics understood this thousands of years ago. They believed that real strength lies in patience, not the kind of patience that waits quietly for something to happen, but the kind that chooses to trust the process even when nothing seems to be moving. Seneca said, "No great thing is created suddenly." And yet, we live as if greatness should be instant, as if progress, success, even healing should happen quickly, or else it must not be working. But if you plant a tree and yank on its branches every day to try and speed it up, you don't help it grow, you ruin it. And sometimes that's exactly what we do to ourselves. We try to rush our journey, force our transformation, demand results before we're even fully rooted. But nature doesn't rush. Growth has a rhythm. So does life. And when you learn to move with it instead of against it, everything becomes lighter, more fluid, more real. Instead of constantly asking, why isn't it happening yet? Whatever it is for you, what if you shifted the question to something deeper? What if you asked, who am I becoming in the process? That question changes everything, because it takes your focus off of what you're chasing and turns it inward, toward your character, your mindset, your values. It invites you to recognize that this journey isn't just about getting somewhere, it's about becoming someone. And that shift is power. Quiet, grounded, unshakable power. You stop being the desperate seeker, grasping at outcomes, measuring your life by speed, and you start becoming the grounded creator, the one who knows that mastery takes time. That real transformation doesn't arrive with fireworks. It happens in silence, in the moments no one sees, in your discipline, in your patience, in your willingness to keep going without demanding that life rush to meet your expectations. That's the kind of patience the Stoics spoke about, not passive waiting, but active trust. A deep confidence that if you're showing up fully, honestly, and consistently, the results will take care of themselves, maybe not in your timing, but in the right timing. Plato once said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." And in today's world, one of the greatest forms of power is patience, because we're surrounded by noise, urgency, pressure, everyone shouting for more, faster now. But to slow down intentionally is to reclaim your mind, to step out of the chaos and choose your pace instead of being pushed by the pace of others. That's not weakness, that's control. And not the kind that tries to control outcomes, but the kind that controls you, your reactions, your choices, your mindset. That's the foundation of real strength. Carl Jung spoke about individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, not who society expects you to be. That kind of growth takes time. It requires space. It doesn't respond well to pressure or deadlines. It unfolds when you stop trying to perform your life and start living it from the inside out. The version of you that's grounded, aligned, and whole won't arrive through panic. It arrives through presence. And presence takes patience. But let's be honest, patience is hard, especially when the world rewards quick results and flashy progress, especially when you feel like you're doing everything right and still not seeing what you hoped for. That's when the mind starts to panic. That's when the fear creeps in. But that's also the moment where trust becomes a choice. Not a blind one, not a passive one, a grounded choice to believe that effort matters even if results are delayed. To believe that timing matters even if it's not yours. To believe that you're growing even if it's not visible yet. Socrates believed that the secret to change is focusing all your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And part of building something meaningful, whether it's a career, a relationship, or a stronger sense of self, is learning how to build with patience, to lay each brick intentionally rather than throwing them together in a hurry, to be okay with the slow, the quiet, the incomplete. Because nothing truly great happens overnight. Not peace, not wisdom, not success. All of it is grown, moment by moment, choice by choice, season by season. So maybe today, the work isn't to move faster. Maybe it's to move better, with more intention, more depth, more clarity. Maybe it's about letting go of the pressure to constantly prove yourself and choosing instead to trust that who you're becoming matters more than how quickly you get there. Maybe patience isn't the thing that slows you down. Maybe it's the thing that makes you unstoppable, not because you're rushing towards something, but because you're rooted in something deeper. And that's what the Stoics really meant. That patience isn't waiting for life to give you something. It's knowing that you're already walking toward it. That even when it feels like nothing is happening, something is. Within you, around you, all the time. Quietly, but surely. That's the rhythm of growth. And when you start to honor it, you stop fearing the delay. You stop needing everything to happen now, because you begin to trust. You're becoming exactly who you're meant to be. And that's always worth the wait. What does it feel like to pour your whole heart into something, your time, your energy, your hope, only to come up short? To do everything right, follow every step, give everything you have, and still watch the door stay shut? It's exhausting. It leaves you questioning your worth, your instincts, your direction. You wonder if you're cursed or just not good enough. And over time it begins to harden you. Not because you've lost hope, but because you're tired of hurting every time you reach for something that doesn't reach back. There's something quietly brutal about chasing, because the more desperate you become, the more invisible you seem to the very thing you're chasing. As if the universe senses the grasp in your energy and turns away. Now hold that picture and imagine the opposite. Imagine moving with clarity, acting with calm intention, showing up fully without bargaining, without fear. You're still committed, still doing the work, but you're no longer attached to how things must unfold. You're not looking for guarantees. You're focused on the action itself, on showing up as the person you respect, regardless of the outcome. That's aligned action. That's when everything starts to feel different. You're no longer performing for approval or pushing from panic. You're living from the inside out, moving in a direction that feels right to your core, even if you don't yet know where it will lead. It's not about doing less. You still show up, you still work hard, but the energy underneath that work is different. You're not begging the world to cooperate. You're not hinging your peace on someone else's response or some external validation. You act with integrity because it aligns with who you are, not because you're trying to manipulate an outcome. Marcus Aurelius captured this in one simple phrase: do what you must, let what happens happen. There's freedom in that, because once you've done your part, what remains is not up to you. That's not failure, that's clarity. When you act from fear, from scarcity, from desperation, you start to broadcast anxiety, and that energy pushes things away. People can feel it, even if you never say it aloud. That grasping, needy energy creates tension in your body, in your words, in your presence. And tension doesn't attract, it repels. But when you act from peace, when you move from a place of self-trust and inner steadiness, you become magnetic. Not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you're rooted, calm, clear. And people are drawn to that. Opportunities are drawn to that. Because it feels stable, it feels intentional, it feels safe. There's a quiet shift that happens when you stop chasing outcomes and start aligning with values. When your focus moves from "what can I get" to "who am I becoming," you begin to carry yourself differently. You're no longer rushing, comparing, proving. You're not trying to beat anyone to the finish line because you realize the path you're on is yours alone. And that mindset, that internal shift, starts to create a new external reality. Not instantly, not with fireworks, but slowly, surely, the world starts to respond differently. Not because you pushed harder, but because you moved smarter, softer, truer. Aristotle believed that virtue is found in the balance, not in extremes, but in the middle path. Aligned action lives there. It's the middle ground between forcing and floating, between control and chaos, between caring deeply and clinging desperately. It asks you to care enough to show up fully, but to let go enough to breathe. And that's where most people struggle. They think if they let go of control, they'll lose their chance. But in reality, letting go is what gives you a chance. A real one, not just at success, but at peace along the way. Carl Jung spoke often about the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves that influence our behavior from the dark. Desperation often comes from that shadow, from wounds we haven't yet healed, from fears we haven't yet faced. The fear of not being enough, the fear of being forgotten, the fear of missing our moment. And when we chase from those fears, our actions may look noble on the surface, but underneath they're rooted in panic. And panic, Jung would say, is the ego's response to uncertainty. But the soul trusts timing. The soul knows that anything truly meant for you will not require you to lose yourself to get it. So when you find yourself pushing, chasing, grasping, pause. Ask yourself one quiet question. Am I doing this from fear or from alignment? Not to shame yourself, but to check in, to realign. That one question can pull you back into your center, into that place where your actions match your values, not your wounds. That place where you move not to impress, not to prove, but because the action itself is worthy. The effort itself is fulfilling, and the outcome, a bonus. Plato once said, "The beginning is the most important part of the work." And in this case, the beginning is intention. What energy are you bringing to your efforts? Because that energy shapes everything. Not in some mystical, magical way, but in a real human, psychological way. Your mindset affects your choices. Your choices shape your behavior, and your behavior builds your life. So, if you're building from fear, don't be surprised when it collapses. But if you're building from truth, from presence, from grounded intention, that structure lasts. You can want something deeply and still be okay without it. That's not weakness, that's strength. You can dream big, act boldly, and still rest in uncertainty without losing your peace. That's not indifference, that's mastery. And when you learn how to do that, to move with clear purpose while remaining unattached to how it all unfolds, you stop chasing what was never yours and start becoming a magnet for what is. Life doesn't always reward force, but it often honors alignment. So take a breath, step back, check in with yourself. You don't need to run yourself into exhaustion trying to control every outcome. You don't need to prove your worth through how fast things fall into place. Trust that you are already enough, that the work you're doing matters, that who you're becoming matters more than what you're achieving, and let that truth guide your next step, not out of desperation, but out of quiet, grounded power, because that's where real change begins, not when the world finally gives you what you want, but when you no longer need it in order to feel whole. Have you noticed that when you finally let go, when you stop obsessing, stop forcing, stop chasing, things start to move on their own? Not always in some grand, immediate way, but in small, undeniable shifts. A conversation opens up, a door cracks, an opportunity circles back. People seem to lean in just a little more. You walk into a room not trying to prove anything, and yet you're the one people notice. That's not some mystical trick or random coincidence. That's the power of presence. That's what happens when your energy isn't scattered by fear or tension, but centered in calm. What people feel from you has more to do with your internal state than your external performance. There's something magnetic about a person who is relaxed in their own skin, someone who isn't grasping for attention or scrambling for control, someone who trusts their timing, who carries themselves with quiet certainty. That kind of energy is rare, and because it's rare, it's valuable. The truth is, most people are living in survival mode, not because they're in danger, but because their mind never rests. They're always trying to get somewhere, fix something, earn someone's approval. But when you're grounded, you bring a different frequency into the room, one that doesn't demand, but invites. And that shift isn't about faking confidence. It's about actually calming your nervous system, regulating your breath, releasing the need to manage every detail. Stoic philosophy reminds us that peace begins when expectation ends. Epictetus said, Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. That's not just a line about money. It's about your internal state. It's about needing less to feel full, wanting less to feel whole. Because the more you need from the outside world, the more you give it power over your peace. But when you reduce that need, when you're content within yourself, you become unshakable, clear. And when you're clear, you act from intention, not impulse. You know this feeling even if you can't always explain it. You've seen someone walk in a room and command attention without saying a word, not because they were loud, but because they were still. That's what happens when confidence comes from alignment, not ego. It's the kind of energy that says, I'm not here to impress you. I'm just here as I am. And strangely, that's the kind of energy that ends up impressing people the most, because it doesn't come with pressure. It feels like permission for others to relax too. Carl Jung believed that what we resist persists, and often we resist stillness because we don't trust that anything can happen without us doing something, without striving, without proving. But ironically, it's in the stillness, when you stop trying to manipulate life, that the real shifts begin. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clutching. It means you recognize that forcing outcomes often closes doors that patience would have opened. Because while action matters, the energy behind that action matters more. Aristotle once said that happiness is the meaning and purpose of life, the whole aim and end of human existence. But happiness, for the Stoics, wasn't found in the temporary pleasure of things. It was found in the deep contentment of living in accordance with your nature, and part of that nature is peace. When you operate from anxiety, you move against your own design. You burn out, you disconnect. But when you operate from trust, from alignment, you begin to flow again. That doesn't mean life gets easier. It means you stop making it harder than it needs to be. When you're calm, you become clear. You make better decisions. You speak with more power. You listen without defensiveness. You see situations for what they are, not through the fog of panic, but through the lens of presence. And clarity, when practiced consistently, becomes confidence, not the loud kind, not the showy kind, but the kind that's rooted deep in your bones. A confidence that doesn't depend on the room's reaction because it's not performing for it. And that kind of confidence, that's the kind the world respects. Plato wrote that the first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself. And often that battle is quieter than we think. It's not won in public. It's won in those private moments, when you choose to breathe instead of react, when you choose to step back instead of chase, when you choose to trust that if you let go of what's not aligned, you make space for what is. That's not just personal development. That's liberation. It's freedom from a mindset that says you have to hustle for your worth, earn your peace, or force life to love you. Letting go isn't weakness. It's strength wrapped in wisdom. It's knowing that your value doesn't increase when someone sees it, and it doesn't decrease when someone doesn't. It's remembering that abundance isn't just about having more, it's about needing less. Because when you need less, you fear less. And when you fear less, you live more. So if you're feeling heavy, tense, or overwhelmed, ask yourself, what am I gripping that I could release? What outcome am I trying to force that might be blocking what's naturally meant for me? You don't need to control every piece to receive what's meant for you. Sometimes, what you need most is to relax, to trust, to step back just enough to allow the life that's been trying to reach you to finally arrive. And when you do that, when you let go, even slightly, watch what happens. The job callback, the unexpected message, the creative breakthrough, the moment of clarity, the lightness in your chest. It's not a coincidence. It's the result of a shift within you. Because when you relax, you realign. And when you realign, everything begins to rise. Not because life changed, but because you did. Let this truth stay with you. You don't have to force what's meant for you. When you move with calm and act with clarity, what's meant to find you begins to flow naturally in your direction. If this message spoke to something real in you, there's another video on the screen right now that goes even deeper. Let that be your next step. Thank you for being here. Come back when you need a quiet reminder of who you are and who you're becoming.